Hello again, everyone. Seb from Intuiface here. Thanks for joining me in my second session for today, where we are going to talk about how to connect Intuiface to the world. By that, we mean how do you access external data? How do you add some business logic to your experience? Or how do you connect to an external peripheral, such as a barcode scanner? So to answer these questions, the main answer will be using interface assets. I will try to break this down into the three categories, levels that you see here on the screen, and we will start nice and easy without requiring any code. Excel is one of them, API Explorer is the other one, and we are actually going to focus on API Explorer today because we already have lots and lots of videos about Excel, and most of you who have used Intuiface already, I hope, know how much power you can bring to an interface experience by adding just a very simple Excel file to import your data. Today, I want to talk to the world. Let's go with web services and the API Explorer. Second level, should I say, we will see how to use the local network triggers or the web triggers, meaning still using off-the-shelf interface assets. You don't have to create anything, just regular triggers to retrieve data from external applications, third-party apps, or web content. And last, we will finish with how do you write some code. If I hope today we have designers, integrators, developers attending this session. So I hope all of you will find what you're looking for. Let's start without code. As I said, we're going to focus on the API Explorer. I hope for those who attended the tips and tricks session, we're going to reuse the content from the quick service restaurant base. So actually, we are going to try to display a menu in these sections. And to do that, I'm going to go back in edit mode and use the API Explorer. So the first thing, interface asset, that's the panel here on the left. This is where everything's going to happen. Either you use one which is off the shelf, as I mentioned, Excel or API Explorer, or one that we already provide for you, or as this barcode scanner you can see here, this one doesn't have an icon, it's a generic icon. That's one I created myself too, and we are going to use this one a bit later in this session. So API Explorer. When you start this one, you actually see some examples. You have access to a tutorial if it's the first time you launch this. But in the end, you have one field, which is enter the request URL for your web API here. If you have no idea what this is, that's why we have a tutorial. So in our case, we have a database. I'm again going to use Airtable because I really like their documentation. So let's jump to our base and see what kind of data we want to import. So we have the list of products. I'm going to focus on the section 1 to handle the first column on the left. These are the products. And as I said, you're not going to have to write any code to use the API Explorer. You will need, though, to understand the documentation of the web service you intend to use. So in this case, their documentation is accessible here, API documentation. And this one is pretty well made. That's why I keep using it as an example in my videos and in my sessions. We are looking at our products. We want to list the records. And actually, this is the request a developer would have to use. You don't need to really to understand what it does. And in particular, you don't need to understand the result. You see this JSON text, which is the response from the web service. The API Explorer is going to parse this for you. So all you need to do here is copy the request, go back in API Explorer and paste it and send the request. Hit the blue button. So API Explorer is going to analyze the request, extract the different parameters. And actually here we don't want to limit to 3 records. We want all of them. So now we have 41 records. And that's actually because in our base, we don't want the grid view. We don't want all the records. We just want this view here. So let's change the parameter here, validate, and now we have the 8 breakfast section 1 products we were looking for. So on the left, this is the request side. The host, you can do some get, post, put, patch. So you do need to speak HTTP requests. But again, we're not writing any PHP, any JavaScript. The API Explorer is doing the job for us. On the right-hand side here, that's the results. It's actually the JSON, which we see in a much nicer way. For example, if it's an URL, we display an image. So we know exactly what kind of field we are looking at. And you can select which properties will be interesting for you to display in the list or in your collection in the experience. So for this one, I'm actually going to keep just the name and the main image, and I will unselect all the other ones. So we have a simple, nice template. Actually, I may put the description back so we have a long text. You can import this. Make sure you name your interface asset properly. So in this case, this is section 1 and create. So by default, Composer is going to create an asset grid with the data feed being your product section 1 and a template. We do have long videos explaining how to create these templates, how to modify them. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that today. I'm just going to try to make this a bit more usable. So let's see what we can do. I actually want the image to be at the bottom here. I want my two texts, well, first to be white so I can see them. And we probably want a smaller image on the corner. The title would probably go here and be aligned to the left. Let me zoom on that. We want this group to be wider, something like this, and the description maybe would go like that. Again, aligned to the left, and something like this. Yeah, I may not have enough real estate to display all my items. Let's see what it looks like. So right now we have a horizontal asset grid. That's not what we're looking for. We want something vertical. We want something here. And yeah, that's probably a bit too big. But again, you get the idea, right? Actually, let me just move this here. Adapt. The title would go here. Adapt so it fits. And see, when I resize one of the object, it resizes all of them. That's the beauty of data templates. All right. So yeah, it took us, what, 2-3 minutes with the explanations to create a collection without these big buttons we have here at the bottom. And that's about it. If you want to create another one, and that's one of the things I demonstrated in the tips and tricks, and I want to show it again here because in the end, we have one single database here with multiple views. This is how a database manager would speak. So if we go back to our API Explorer, and if we reuse the last query we used, so I have my history here, I'm actually just going to change this view because now I want my section 2. So I have only 4 items in this one. Actually, I don't care about all these properties I'm selecting because I always have access to all of them. That's the important step. Name your interface asset. Create. And the one thing I showed in the tips and tricks, which I wanted to show here again, is because the data has the same structure, we have the same columns, the same fields, the JSON is exactly the same, I can actually just duplicate my collection here. And then in the data feed, where we have the data source, where we choose from which feed are we getting the data from and are we trying to apply a template on, I can switch the feed from one to another. And because these two feeds have the same structure, all my bindings, which you didn't even see, they were created automatically, are going to be preserved. So by just doing this, and there we go, as I said, my template is a bit too big. If I put this to the back and a bit less to the back, there we go. We have our section 2 items. So that's the API Explorer, and you can do get, you can do post, put, you can add as many parameters, you can change the parameters on the fly because you have properties, triggers, and actions as you have for all the other assets in Intuiface. So that was level one. Technically, I didn't write any code. I just did a copy and paste of a documentation link, and that's it. Then you can just play with the UI and adjust to make the template you're looking for. Let's go to the second level. So no code on the interface side, but some code on whatever wants to talk to interface. And we're going to use the local network triggers in this example. And by local network trigger, actually, I'm going to use the smallest local network possible, which is my local machine, local host. This example is reusing the entrance flow management reference design that is available on our website, and which is was very trendy this year, right, due to COVID-19. So basically, how to manage the entrance of a public place like a store by counting the number of people who are going in, going out, and then saying, nope, we are at capacity, please wait a few minutes. So in this case, we are going to focus actually on this part. That's what if you want to use a third-party solution to automatically count these persons entering or leaving the store. So we are not going to add any custom interface set in the experience. We're just going to ask to this third-party app to send us some messages, to send us some network triggers. How do you do that? Well, in this case, we are using a Python script using OpenVINO. So yes, this is some code. And as I said, that's on the third-party side. So if you are using an off-the-shelf system like Sitecorp, like Quivity, like Axis, the security cameras, you could ask them, please, when something happens, can you just send a message to the interface player? And by sending a message, you're basically doing this kind of requests or this kind of requests, which is when someone gets in, send me a message. You decide the name, right? You give them the specs. When someone gets out, send me another message. So that's what's happening on the third-party app side. What happens on the interface side? What do we actually receive and what do we have to do to handle these messages? Well, as soon as you have added your local network triggers, the first one here, you can add some triggers, and the trigger will be message is received, fairly straightforward. You can specify the name of the message that you are expecting. And in this case, we are expecting either count up or count down. And you can see actually one message here, one message here. When we receive count up, we add 1 to the counter of how many people are inside. When we receive count down, we subtract 1. These are the two actions you can see here. So let's see how it works. I'm actually going to launch the Python script with OpenVINO, and it's going to replay a video that you may have seen in this entrance flow. So when someone's going to get inside the store, that's -1. So we went from 2 people may enter to 1. This person is going back. I don't know who this is, but I guess the haircut was before the COVID period. Now we have 2 people. We are at capacity. Please stop. If someone else was coming in front of the store, we would be displaying this red sign. Someone is getting out. We go back to 1 available. So these local network triggers could be sent by any kind of apps. They could be running on the same machine as I just did here using the local host 127.0.0.1 network address, or it could be running on another machine if you had some special sensors running on the Raspberry Pi or whatever specific devices you may have in the field talking to an interface player. Let's have a look at a second example of local network triggers again, but this time it's even within the experience. So we've been asked, and this comes from the community. This was a request from community. How can I have some very custom UI sending some triggers to Intuiface? And in this case, you can see the map of the US with the different states. You know that in Intuiface, all our buttons have a square shape. So if you want to have this weird SVG built buttons, you need to use the HTML frame. So how can you make this frame communicate to the experience? Well, using the local network trigger, you can. So having a look at the asset itself, I won't go through the SVG and the HTML part, which is above here, which is pretty big. It gives all the design. But in the end, what happens here is on every items, every child in this map, there is an event which is added, which when there is a click, will send on the local machine 127.0.0.1. It will send a message, and the message will be select state. I hope you can see that on the screen. And it will also add a parameter. In the previous example, we just sent count up, count down, but the local network message can have up to 3 parameters. In this case, we are adding what I just draw above, the attribute, basically the name of the state. So that's what happens on the HTML side. And I said we are in the section without writing any code on the interface side. I consider this is the web page, not really interface. What would be on the interface side is what do we do with this trigger? So again, local network triggers. We do have a message is received trigger, which is raised. The message is select state, so we know what to do in this particular case. And let's say here we have a data source, right? As we did earlier with API Explorer, in this case, I have an Excel file behind the scene that has the lists of all the states and some additional information. We're going to add a filter on this Excel. We want to see only the state where the code is equal to the parameter 1 coming from the message on the network. So this binding here will be the link between what is inside the HTML and what we want to filter in the Excel file. So let's see this in action. If I press on the state, we're good. It changes all the content. And if we go to Illinois, where we are right now, we can see that no, the capital is not Chicago. I learned this thanks to this experience, actually. My bad. Local network triggers, either on a separate third-party app or even within an interface experience within some HTML code. That's a good way to receive some content, especially on the local machine. Let's move on to our next without code on the interface side, the web triggers. And you can see my scene is empty here because actually we talked about that a bit during the tips and tricks, and we are going to talk about it later. Long story short, because we are a bit on the clock here, this is a web browser. I do have a button which is going to call a web link. And thanks to the API of web triggers, this is going to tell you that please have a look at the tips and tricks session if you weren't there. If you missed it, look at the recording. And if you're going to be here tomorrow, which I expect, please make sure you do not miss the Exploring Touchless Touch options, where we are going to talk about web triggers a lot. So these ones are either done in the previous session or to be seen tomorrow in the Touchless Touch. Then let's get into it, into the real stuff, the custom interface assets. Again, we have 2 languages which are supported. One is .NET, which is only available for player for Windows. The other one is JavaScript, which we will see right after this. In this case, I decided to take the example of a barcode scanner. And actually, I used a barcode scanner, but it could be any kind of scanner. It could be an RFID, could be a barcode, could be a QR code. Something that reads the code, gives an ID, a number, and based on that number, you need to do something on the UX, on the user experience. In this case, I will actually use an ILO barcode scanner, which I have here. And I'm in the office right now. I don't have any bottle of Malbec or Chardonnay, so this will be my bottle. And if I can scan something, something happens on the screen. So let's see how this works. And again, you will learn that tomorrow at the end of this user conference, but we are going to release quite a few videos on lots of topics around interface, and that will include some longer detailed videos on how to create these custom interface assets from A to Z. So in here, I don't want to dive too much in the code. I just want to expose the concepts. This code written in .NET in C# is actually doing a few stuff to talk to the serial port to know that I have a barcode scanner plugged on a USB port and seen as a serial device by Windows. On this particular code, we have a library and something happens, an event happens when a code is scanned. So that's a callback here in which we enter whenever the scanner beeps. We do a few things here, we blah, 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 we don't care about that. What is important is this at the end. We are going to raise an event to Intuiface. We're going to tell Intuiface, hey, a code has been scanned, and there will be a parameter, this string data. That's on the left-hand side is the main class. On the right-hand side, you do have this particular event. So it's an object, and it has one property code. So a barcode has been scanned, and here is the code, which actually was scanned. So that's on the code side. And actually, the person who's going to use Composer, the designer or the integrator, doesn't need to know about that. This could be two different persons, one working on the code and the other one actually working in Composer and retrieving this interface asset. So now we have a barcode scanner. And as we had earlier with the local network triggers, same idea, except we had the messages received. Now we have a code scanned. That's the name of the trigger, the event, which was raised by the code. And we know because the developer was nice and told us, hey, look in the trigger, there is a parameter. That's the code, actually, which was scanned. So as we did with the map, the US states map, where we were using the state ID as a filter parameter in Excel, in here, we are using the code as a value to filter our wines based on the barcode column. So if we look now on the scene, and I detail a little bit what you're looking at right now, this here is the list of all the wines I have in my wonderful database. And you can see that most of them has an unknown barcode because I have only two codes next to me. If I scan again my beautiful Malbec, this one, you do see that the filter was applied. In the list here, we have one single remaining item, which is the one we present in what the user would see in the real experience. If I now scan my wonderful Chardonnay, you get the Chardonnay. So this is the main mechanism, how from the code we can raise some events with properties, with parameters that can then be used within the experience, within Composer, as any kind of trigger. Right? There's no new concept. We are still based on properties, triggers, and actions. And by the way, on this topic, peripherals, sensors, I also have another session tomorrow about working with external sensors and actuators. I will talk more about this barcode scanner, so please make sure you don't miss this one. Last but not least, what about JavaScript? So in the previous example, we were looking at a peripheral. Here we are going to look at adding some business logic, adding a new feature to Intuiface. And this example will show how to dynamically load some content from a folder within the experience. So maybe I should start with the code, and then I will do the demo. This time, this is not C# anymore, this is JavaScript. And again, I won't go into the full details of the code. It's not the purpose of this session. I just want to go through the main concepts. And hopefully you will see the link between this particular code and what we did with the API Explorer earlier, talking about data sources, data feeds, and data templates. So this particular piece of code is going to parse a folder. So you're going to give a folder path to this interface set, and it's written in JavaScript. So JavaScript has way less access than .NET. That's why we added a notion of services. It's called the JavaScript Interface Factory. One of the services that you have available in JavaScript is the file service to help you access the file system. If you're running on an iPad, an Android, or a BrightSign player, you can use this code. And this will work on all the 7 platforms we support, including Samsung Tizen, LG WebOS. We are going to create an empty list at the beginning, and this name is going to be important. And then we use one of the methods from this file service, get directory content. So we are going to analyze all the content within this folder. And for every item we find, we will add something to the images list. This is simplified code. It doesn't check if the item is actually an image or a video or a PDF. It's an illustration. You could actually build an IA, an interface set that would be much more clever than this one, checking the file extension and then creating 3 collections, one for all the images, one for all the videos, one for all the PDFs. Why not? So we have this code which is adding content into this property here, images list. And this is not one single property like the barcode, the code that was given by the barcode scanner. It's a list. It's a set of multiple entries. How can you use that in Intuiface? Well, actually, it's going to be the same as if you had an Excel file with multiple rows, or as if you were using the API Explorer and retrieving multiple records. So you will have a new IA here, which has, as usual, properties, triggers, and actions. You can see it has this folder property, which you can set, so you can dynamically change this in real time, and we're going to see that in the demo. And then we have these read-only properties, which is the images list, which has a single value. So imagine it's an Excel file with one single column, the name of the file you want to display. Of course, you could have multiple properties on this object, the file path, the name, the video size, the image resolution, whatever you can find based on the feed you want to parse and on the information you want to display on the screen. In the scene structure, you will see, well, something pretty usual, a swap collection with a data feed, images list, and with a template, a basic template, basic image. So for the composer user, again, he doesn't need to know what's going on in the JavaScript. What he needs to know is that he has a new interface set that has a data feed, could be an Excel file, could be a piece of JavaScript. For him, it's exactly the same thing. And now if we look actually at the folders, so we have the experience folder, the one I'm using actually right now. Among the interface sets, we have this file system browsing in which I added two different folders. You're looking at the first one here, which has a couple of slides. That's my slide deck number 1, and I have some other slides in the second one. You could add as many as you want, and you could just call the refresh action to load dynamically all the content, whatever name you gave to the files. This one is actually getting the files by alphabetical order, if I'm correct. Okay, enough talking. Let's play with the demo. So right now the slide deck 1 is loaded. That's my swap collection with a slide effect this time, not a fade, as I used in a previous session. So I can slide through my slides, basically. I can press on deck 2. It's going to switch the folder and look into my folder number 2, and that's my slide deck number 2 with different images, different slides. You get the idea. So you could build with this IA a slide deck catalog providing a sales on a tablet, multiple slides available on one single scene with an easy switch depending on what you want to talk about with the prospect. And I think we are right on time. So this is going to conclude the session about connecting Intuiface to the world. Please stay with us. We're going to switch to the live Q&A session. And as for the previous session, I will need your participation. Grab your smartphone and see you there.